Hi guys and welcome to the latest EV review video. So what I have here today is not a typical review because these are quite old, they're 8 years in the market already, but it's more of a personal take on something that was so hyped and so well received by most of the reviewers that I just want to take another look currently in 2020 what they can offer and what is the specific situation regarding these nowadays. So I'll skip these boring technical parts that you can basically read or see anywhere, but let me go straight to the thing that is important, and that's their sound quality, pairing, and how to get the best out of them, and also through some pros and cons list that you should know about before purchasing these. And let me start about something specific to 2020 actually, what's different nowadays than it was in 2012. First of all, these are 8 years in the market already, and they were really popular back in the day. They're still popular, still actively selling. You can purchase new ones, and they sold like hotcakes, which is really good because nowadays there's a lot of them on the second-hand market. And unlike many of their competitors that I really liked and I wanted to try, like ATCs or PMCs, DB1s, things like that, these are quite easy to find and you can find them at a really reasonable price. For example, I bought them at less than 50% of their current retail price in my country. And that's simply something I couldn't do with their competitors, because as I mentioned, they are much more rare on the market. But let's talk how these actually sound. At the moment, 4 months ago, when I got them, I was using floor-standing speakers of a slightly lower quality, Acoustic Energy Aegis Evo 3, that you can see here. These are really nice floor standers. They used to cost $500-600 in the day, and I like them really. But the first thing that I noticed when I switched to LS50s here is how precise they actually are and how capable of drawing really precise image. It's like etching everything in the soundstage, from vocals to instruments. Everything has its really firm place, and you can feel like you can see really tiny details around the stage easily, actually here. And yeah, I was definitely impressed by that. The second thing, yeah, I did notice slightly lower bass depth, but I was surprised that was actually not a big difference as the size between these and these suggest. And actually the quality of bass was much better with LS50s here. Everything just felt so more precise, faster and agile than on these cheaper floor standers. In comparison, going back to these, I felt like everything is becoming a little bit fuzzier, a little bit more blurry, I guess, and also the soundstage is not that good. That's interesting actually, because those are definitely bigger speakers, but these throw wider and deeper soundstage. And that actually leads me to my pros list. First thing that you'll definitely notice if you put them in a proper system, these really do have wide and deep soundstage and also quite tall. Basically in all dimensions they project a huge soundstage, which is something great, especially it's surprising when you hear it coming from such small speakers. The next good thing is, as I mentioned, inside of that soundstage, they image really, really great. And in my room, in my system, it's nice when I actually angle them a little bit towards the listening position. And in that situation, the center of the image gets so focused, so nicely etched and palpable that you can almost feel that the singer is standing right between the speakers. And same goes for every other instrument. You can feel that, let's just say, for example, singer is standing here, the guitar player is slightly back to the left, the bass is slightly back to the right, and maybe some atmospheric details and something like that far in the back. And I must say I was instantly captivated by that. I like them quite a lot. And besides that, for me at least, it's very important that LS50s actually sound quite smooth. There is no coarseness to their mid-range and treble. They are incisive, they are agile and fast-sounding set of speakers, but they have that really nice tonal balance, and I always feel that they have smooth response. Which is something I personally really like because being fast, precise, and analytical is no-go for me if things sounds coarse and rough. Fortunately, that's not the case with them. Okay, now that I told you about everything they do great, let me tell you about something they don't do that good. First of all, as you can see, these are fairly small speakers, and the cone itself is fairly small. And there is a saying, there is no replacement for displacement. That basically means that with such small driver, such small cone, you simply cannot expect earth-shattering or kidney-shattering bass. Now don't get me wrong, these have quite decent bassline. It goes down to 50 Hz, but from there it's just a really steep slope down, and that's it. What this means in the reality is that most of the instruments from the genres like rock, blues, pop, and something similar, acoustics, jazz also, they will sound really natural and they will have all the bass they need to sound realistic and palpable. For example, if I listen to the bass guitar, I completely feel that it's weighty enough, it's etched, it has body, it has weight, and I feel like real, for example, acoustic bass guitar is standing in my room. That's great. But if you want to watch a movie with some, as I mentioned, earth-shattering bass, these will not produce that. You can feel a slight kick of the bass physically, but not like really kidney moving and such. And no speaker of this size can do that. If you want that, you have to move to bigger ones. It may be a problematic thing. For example, I have this quite smallish room and I'm not really capable of having big speakers without them producing a messy bass in my room. You can also go about it by adding subwoofer to these, which is something many people are actually doing, and maybe I'll explore that option too in the future. I would like to try it out. But so far, just know this. If you want to listen to some music with a huge dynamic scale, with a really deep bass, like classical pieces with full-blown orchestras, these are not the best speakers to do that. Also, if you are into electronic music with really hard, long, deep bass lines, then again, you would probably be better with something bigger, something that can pull that weight better than LS50s. But for most other genres, and especially in a small to medium-sized room, I feel that these have sufficient amount of bass. And maybe if you keep them close to wall, you would even have to use provided bangs to close the ports a little bit. And the next thing that I wanted to talk about in the cons list is that LS50s are actually quite insensitive speakers and they like to be driven hard to show their best. But what I mean is if you try to pair them with the amp that does not have good grip, good control over speakers, and especially bass region will suffer. It will lose control, it will start sounding a little bit fuzzy and muddy, and it will influence the whole sound to start being a little bit woolly. And if you read some impressions about them on the web from time to time, you will find such impression about somebody complaining their bass is mumbling. It's muddy and not precise. And I think that's exactly what's happening there. It's a pairing with an amp that simply cannot take the grip with their bass, because they demand firm grip and a nice reserve of current to be controlled well. Now, from my own experience, I heard them with several amps. For example, my own Cyrus 8 VS2 has enough control, enough power and grip to make bass line sound really fast, really agile, and hit with focus and intent. I also heard similar thing when these were connected to Arkham A19, I think, or 29, I'm not really sure. Again, same story, great control, agility, precision, and wide, nice soundstage. But I had some different experiences too. First of all, I heard it with a fairly inexpensive D-class amp. It was a DIY thing, it was really cheap, but connected to that everything just fell apart. Soundstage compressed, the control was lost, and I didn't like the result. Also, a friend of mine was interesting how would these sound with Marantz PM 6004. And he brought it to my place, we hooked everything up, and we were kinda disappointed. That is a fairly decent amp. He's using it to power his Q Acoustics 2020i, I think. And it works really nice. You feel there is enough juice, control, and everything. But hooked to LS50s here, and we previously listened them with my own Cyrus amp. That was 10, 12 years ago. It was sold for $1,600, I think. It's just in a different class than that Marantz. So the difference was obvious. Instead of having that huge soundstage, really great focus, really agile bass, soundstage became more flat, and especially bass became a little bit of woolly and not controlled. It's lost focus, it's lost its kick and intent. And from something that I completely understood why these reviewers made these ravingly good reviews, sound coming from these became something that is just okay, but it's actually not better than a really decent $300 or $400 speakers. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to throw your money that way on such speaker and pairing it badly with an amp that does not have guts and grips to control it well. Now, the last thing that I want to touch is placement. Now, these look small and they remind you a lot on desktop speakers or something like that. But make no mistake, these like to be put on a decent pair of speaker stands. And I know that from my personal experience. What you see them on currently is a really heavy, weighty metal stand. It's mass loaded with sand. And they work fine with it. I had it custom made for them. It works really fine. Before I did that, I just kept them on this TV stand behind me. And this is quite massive stand, I might say that, but in the end it is just a shallow TV shelf. And they really sounded, I think that unimpressive would be too light of a word. They didn't sound good at all. If I have heard them only on my TV shelf, I would return or resell these. Because everything, first of all, bass didn't have kick and depth, and it was out of focus. It sounded quite wobbly and woolly, and it was influencing the whole range upwards. Everything lost its focus and its sharpness. Basically similar thing that I explained with a sub-pair amp, what's happening. It also happened when I kept them on TV stand. So TV shelf, bookshelf, or any kind of shelf, if you have to keep them there, just try your best to decouple them with some sort of speaker stands made of foam or something like that. But if there is any chance to put them on dedicated speaker stands, do that. Because otherwise you will simply not hear what all these reviewers were telling you. Why were they raving that these are so great? And I am currently really liking them. I'm using them for 4 months now, and I love how rich and huge they sound. The scale of the soundstage and the precision, agility, and precise etching of every tone is great. But when I put them on a shelf, all of that crumbles, bass becomes bloated, and instead of sounding like a really natural whole, it sounds like regions divided themselves, and they have their own thing going on there, with bass being bloated, with details lost, and imaging is just cramped and blurred and muddied. So this is a cold, hard truth, but it is the truth. If you do that, you will not hear what these can do. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is basically a practical issue that might be a problem for someone. For me it's not, but for some it is. These do not have grills. It's just like this. So if you have small kids, this bright orange, amber, copper, however you like to call it, cone is going to draw their attention, and they will want to poke at it. And actually previous owner of these LS50s sold them because of that very reason. His kids started to walk and started trying to poke these. He kept turning them around towards the wall, but eventually he got bored of doing that. He wanted to listen to them actually, so he sold them and bought some speakers with grills. For me, that's not a problem, but you should definitely consider that. Because also there are no aftermarket grills, because there are no hidden magnets or any mounting holes or anything like that. And let me move to the conclusion of this video. 4 months after I started using LS50s, I completely understand all of those raving reviews. When you pair them correctly and when you position them correctly on a decent speaker stands, they do sound sublime. They have that sort of agile, fast, incisive sound with great imaging. They also have really great and rich tonality. It's not just being analytical for the purpose of being analytical. The tonality is great. All of the reverbs and male vocals, female vocals, acoustic guitars, you can clearly differentiate sound of natural materials like wood, leather and such. They sound really warm and fuzzy, and metal instruments sounds scratchy and a little bit annoying like they do in the real life. So these are really, really fine speakers. But please do keep in mind the cons that I mentioned previously. If you want to pair them with fairly low-powered amp, with an amp that has loosey bass, that does not have firm grip, and it's not made for heavy loads, avoid them, simply steer away from them. You can find some other speakers that will serve in that type of system much better. Also, please do try to put them on a proper speaker stance, because that's the only way you will going to hear everything that people really loved about them. They can work on some sort of shelf, but they will work at like 40-50% of what they can really do. And the last part is basically that I think that now, currently in 2020, it's a great time to buy these if you ever wanted to try them out, if you were curious to try them out. They were very popular. There's a lot of them in homes right now. Some of that people are making transition to something else, maybe better. Some of them are just disappointed they didn't get what they expected to get, and I guess a lot of buyers were slightly disappointed with them because they did not provided proper system for them to be at their best. But the reason basically it's not important. What's important is that nowadays you can buy them new for $1,200, sometimes even lower during some sort of sale, and I do think they fully justify their price. If you want to buy them new, they fully justify their price. They're great speakers. But if you're okay with buying second-hand, this is a crazy good deal, because just by being patient a little, you can find them at 50% of their initial value for speakers that are still, they're not vintage, they're not too old, you will not see some marks of prolonged use or some wear and tear. As you can see, these look lovely in my home. People actually don't know if they are new or used. They do have some scratches in the back, but you cannot see that. And all of that is making LS50s a really nice opportunity to get into serious hi-fi, really fine hi-fi for really decent, reasonable amount of money. And the good thing, if you buy them second-hand, if you don't like them, if they don't pair well with your system or with your room or your preferences, you can resell them almost at no loss if you bought them for a good price, or at a fairly small loss at least. So yeah, I really think these are still attractive offer in 2020. Even the new ones, but especially the second-hand ones. So that would be all for today, guys. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please click like and subscribe, and see you next time. Thank you.